If you haven't yet, I want you to go to jobethevans.com and take the college readiness quiz. There's a quiz there for parents and a quiz there for students. When you take that quiz, you get a detailed explanation of where you're at and actionable steps for you to take to move you beyond where you're at right now. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon. Hello, Elevators. Today we are here with Zoe Parsons, and she's going to talk to us about relationships. And why I thought this was so important to talk about is because as your daughters or you go to college, the separation in communication starts to happen between parent and child. And I think one of the main concerns with parents is always that their child is going to get in an unhealthy relationship and, may not realize that she's in an unhealthy relationship. I personally never experienced an unhealthy relationship, but I witnessed some of my friends go through them in college, and they would start to feel trapped in that relationship for whatever reason, because they were scared, possibly because their their personal value had been based on the fact of saving themselves for marriage, and they felt stuck in that relationship because they had given that to that person, um, because they really deep down believed that this was the person that they were supposed to spend the rest of their life with, despite all the red flags and all the things that were going wrong. So I think it's important that we educate ourselves now on what is a bad relationship, what is a good relationship, and discuss everything in that. So today, Zoe's going to talk about the red flags, what a healthy relationship is versus what an abusive relationship is, and how we can create boundaries in our relationships and teach our daughters to do the same. So I'm going to let Zoe go ahead and take over. And Zoe, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do. I know you do a lot of speaking in high schools and speaking to this age group of young women, but go ahead and tell us everything that you want us to know, but start with telling us a little bit about yourself and your story.
So first of all, I'd just like to say thanks for having me, and hello to everyone who's watching. And really how I kind of started doing what I'm doing is because I've found myself in an abusive relationship, and I didn't know it was abusive. It was kind of, people would say to us, oh, but you look so happy, all the Instagram and the Facebook pictures where you look like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, it was a totally different story. And what I found is, at first I felt that he was my perfect partner, that he was my soulmate. He kind of met my criteria, as it were. And everything seemed really, really good until we got married. I got pregnant very quickly. And then I had my daughter. And within a very short space of time, things started to slowly change. He became more controlling, was very jealous, very possessive, um, wanted to know my Facebook passwords, my work passwords, needed to have access to everything. Um, Over time, like the physical abuse then started, and it started slowly with like pinching and gripping and pulling my hair, and until eventually he was raping me on a daily basis, and I was being strangled, and until it escalated to the point that he was doing this in front of my daughter. She was probably about 3 at the time. and I remember there was one instance where he was choking me up against a wardrobe, and it was in front of her, and I looked at her and I could see her little face, and I just thought, though I didn't feel worthy, and I actually felt I deserved everything he did to me, because by then my self-esteem was so low. Actually, looking at her, I was like, she deserved better. She deserved to know what a healthy relationship was. She deserved to know and grow up not having this as her ideal relationship, or having this as a relationship goal. So at that point I was like, no, I need to do whatever I can to try and get out of this situation. So eventually I managed to get out of the situation, but he then proceeded to stalk me, harass me for 6 months. It ended up with him breaking into my home. he attacked me, headbutted me. I had to go to hospital because I had to have 12 stitches in my face. He's currently in prison now for what he did to me. So obviously that is giving me some peace. But what I found is you're then into a whole other area of where you're trying to understand really what happened. Because you see, for me, my mum used to say to me, oh, if a man ever hits you, if he ever gives you a black eye, you need to leave. And my response to that, well, yeah, of course. Why would you ever stay if someone's
Mhm.
doing that to you? And but in my relationship, I actually didn't get a black eye until 6 months after I'd left the relationship. And yet it was highly abusive, pretty much right from the beginning when I look back.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, what could I have done differently to not get myself into this type of situation? Because and what I found is, this is now why I educate in schools, is there just isn't this type of education. I know when I went to school, you have your sex education and all of that, and you're told about diseases and how to avoid them and how to not get pregnant, but you're not told about toxic people, narcissistic people, people who are abusive, people that are emotionally controlling. And these are the type of relationships that you end up getting into when you're not educated. So I decided that I was going to take what I'd learned, get myself trained and qualified. So I've started, so I have my own practice as a counselor. And I just help women, I coach women who've been in abusive relationships. But obviously, like I said, I also educate teenagers, because what I've found really shocking as a statistic is 1 in 3 teenagers already is in an abusive relationship. And for me, I find that really disturbing and really scary, that you've got these young people who are trapped in these relationships
Mhm.
already. And statistics show us that 1 in 5 of those teenagers will stay in that relationship, and that relationship will continue on into adulthood. And for whatever reason, like you said earlier, maybe it's because they feel trapped because of, social conventions, religious reasons,
Mhm.
community pressures, cultural pressures. There are lots of reasons why someone might stay in that relationship. But also the main thing is, I feel, is due to lack of education.
Mhm.
And really, if you can educate yourself on, one, knowing and understanding the red flags of an abusive person. So I'll talk about this a little bit more, but you've got that as an area. You've also got understanding the difference between a healthy and a abusive relationship, because you see, we're brought up to watch TV, and yet a lot of the films that we watch, women are portrayed in a certain way, and those types of relationships that we sometimes see on the TV are actually highly toxic,
Mhm.
but we're taught to accept these as normal and healthy. And this is how we then model maybe our future relationships on. And then the other area, which is so important, is being able to set and implement boundaries and being empowered enough so that you feel confident enough to say no or wait, whatever your
Mhm.
answer may be. And it's really by looking at these 3 key areas that you, as teenagers, but also as parents who want to help your teenagers, you can help them stay safe,
Mhm.
essentially. So obviously, I'm going to go through these 3 areas in a little bit more detail. But what I have done is I've put together a handout. So I'll send the link so you guys
Yeah.
can have it, and then go to the website and you can download a free handout, which basically summarizes these 3 points that I'm going to talk about. And it's going to give you some links of places where you can go to just get more information, because really, knowledge is power, and educating yourself on this stuff is so important.
Yes.
So let's think about red flags. So first of all, why are they called red flags? It's because what happens is when you meet someone, they're generally, so I'm going to say a toxic person instead of, and a toxic person will cover all the phrases that you might hear, such as abusive, narcissistic, sociopathic, psychopathic. It's kind of, there's so many different phrases out there to cover this one area. So I'm just going to say toxic, and you'll know what I'm talking
Okay.
about. So a toxic person will essentially, when they meet you, they'll be wearing a mask. You've probably heard of the phrase, a sheep in wolf's clothing.
Mhm.
And what this person does is they have this mask, but because this is hiding who they truly are, they can't maintain it for very long. And what happens is this mask slips and you see glimpses of what the person is like underneath. And those glimpses are the red flags.
Mhm.
So quite often what we find with red flags is we ignore them,
Mhm.
we make excuses for them, and we tend to not trust our gut or our
Mhm.
intuition on this stuff. And we go, oh, but generally he's a really nice person, and he only spoke or behaved that way because he's had a really bad day at school or work or college
Mhm.
or whatever justification we're going to give. But ultimately, as women, we need to not do that, because what that's doing is that's actually allowing someone to take further advantage of our kindness, of our niceness, as it
Mhm.
were. And we need to guard against that. So let me give you some examples of red flags. So for instance, the first one is you might be with someone and they rush you into the relationship, and you feel it's like it's only been 2 weeks and they're already telling you that they love you. 3 weeks, they want to marry you. Week 4, they will decide they want to have 2 babies with you, and
Mhm.
it can be very rushed, very pressured. And ultimately, why a toxic person does this rushing into a relationship is because if you think about that mask that they're wearing, they know that they can't keep it on forever. So they want to get you to a
Mhm.
point where you're rushed and you're committed and you're fully in love with them, or you've committed, however that might be, whether that's physically, emotionally, sexually, financially, however, they want you in that position quickly so that you don't back off. Because as women, we know that once you commit to a certain degree, generally you're going to stay there, right? So that's one of the main red flags, is rushing you into a relationship. The next one is, are they jealous? You see, and we get told that the more jealous a person is, the more they love us, right?
Mhm.
No, that's not the case. Basically, jealousy is not a sign of love. Trust is a sign of love. Jealousy is a sign of control. And control is a key factor within an abusive relationship. So if they're jealous, are they wanting to know where you're spending your time? Do they not like you, I don't know, going and doing homework with this person, whether male or female? It could be anyone.
Right.
And it's like they have this jealousy, it's this possessiveness. And you know what? At first, we might find it flattering. We might find this kind of jealous nature flattering, but it is a red flag, because jealousy leads on to possessiveness, and it is all about control. And when you think about a toxic relationship, an unhealthy relationship, that is based on control, and you don't want that. Trust
Right.
me. Another thing that they might do, is a red flag, is they might ask to check your social media. Everyone's allowed private space, but they might ask me like, oh, who are you talking to? Let me see, what's your social media doing? What have you
Mhm.
posted? And this kind of intrusive, kind of not allowing you private space. So that's a red flag. The other thing they might do is they might make you feel guilty for spending time with your friend or family. So they might do the whole emotional guilt trip thing here, where they're like, oh, I haven't seen you all week and I thought we was going to spend some time together, and now you've just spent it with
Yeah.
your best friend, your mom, your brother, whoever. That type of emotional guilt tripping is a red flag. They might use crude or disrespectful language when they are speaking about others. So, for instance, when they talk about their ex, they might say, oh, my ex is a right cow, and obviously worse
Mhm.
expletives they might use, very disrespectful. Or they might say, oh, they might always play the victim. So it might be, their tutor, or if they're working, their boss is always picking on them, that they're always hard done by, that nothing ever really works for them. So that is also a red flag. Also, um, do they have really big mood swings? So is 1 minute are they happy, the next minute they're not? Are they kind of angry? Do you feel that you have to walk on eggshells a little bit
Mhm.
when you're with them, because you never really know what their mood is going to be like? Um, are you pressured to have sex with them? Maybe send them sexy pictures, maybe talk or do things that you don't feel comfortable with. Basically, that is a red flag. So when you think about red flags, it's really anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, pressured, or confused, really. And if you start feeling this way when you're dating someone, you need to step back and really look at their behavior, because it's your intuition saying to you that there's something wrong. So that's really red flags in a very short nutshell. But if you know the signs and you understand them, then obviously it can protect you from either getting into a relationship or developing that relationship further.
Yeah, so you're talking about all this in relation to like the person that's in the relationship, but what I was thinking the whole time, since I had more than one friend that was in an abusive relationship, was like, if I know, like, the things that happened with my friends were so extreme, it was obvious. But, if you are a friend and you're watching this unfold with your best friend or something, you know, you're educated and like, hey, like, the fact that he's mad that you're hanging out with your friends, not okay. The fact
Hmm.
that he's asking you to do X, Y, and Z, is not okay. Like, you can recognize that as a friend and as a parent, which as a parent you have to be really careful with how you approach that, whereas a friend might be able to be a little more bold and call you out on it. But I think it's important that as people are listening to this, that they're not just thinking about themselves, but they're thinking about their daughters, when they're thinking about their your cousin, your friends, your family, the people that are around you, and just being aware of these things. So you've described really well what an unhealthy relationship is, those red flags in an unhealthy relationship. We're going to see those red flags in that unhealthy relationship.
Hmm.
So I guess we're going to see the opposite of that in a healthy relationship. So describe to us what a healthy relationship is. But first, something I always teach and talk about is, when we're looking for a job, or some kind of career or a car or whatever, we have very specific things that we're looking for in this next opportunity. So let's just say it's a car. So we might want it to get certain gas mileage and be a specific color, a specific brand. We want to feel a specific way when we're driving it. We're thinking about all these things, but a lot of times when we are looking for relationships, we're just out blindly looking for a relationship, not necessarily the right one. And I think it's really important, and you're going to talk a little bit about this, but that we know what we're wanting in a relationship when we're seeking them. And in college, like, you may be like, I'm not looking for a man, or whatever point in your life you may not be looking. But a lot of times these relationships find us without us looking for them. And I think when you're talking about abusive relationships, I think a lot of times those types of people seek you out because it kind of fits in with what you're saying. They may zone in on you and make you fall in love with them because a lot of them are so good at that, part of
Hmm.
the manipulation. So I think that it's important, and something I always teach is that, like, if you're out for a relationship, or you're at the age where you are dating and finding new relationships, because friendships can be abusive too, um, that you are specific about what you want in your relationship. So you go ahead and talk about what a healthy relationship is and give the listeners a little bit of an idea of what, maybe some things they can put on their list of things they're looking for in a partner.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I totally agree with you. One of the things I do with my clients is work out basically what is the difference between your needs and your wants.
Hmm.
Because whether or not you're looking for a relationship, you still need to know this for your own self and your own personal development. Because, like you said, when these people do turn up or you do come across someone, you need to just be prepared. And this is such an important piece of work that you can do. So, I mean, obviously, with parents talking to their children, it's really about communication and educating. So, I mean, with me, I've got an 8-year-old daughter. So I will be talking to her as she gets older about red flags and
Hmm.
about narcissistic people and these toxic people and how they behave and what you need to do to keep yourself safe, so that she is armed with the knowledge to be able to help herself, but also, like you said, to be able to help her cousins and her friends, and just to have that level of awareness. But going back to a healthy relationship, basically, I think sometimes what happens is we go into a relationship wanting that person to make us happy. And ultimately, when you go into a relationship, you need to be able to make yourself happy before you rely on someone else to make you
Hmm.
happy. Because when you have that neediness, basically, you will do anything then to please them so that they make you happy. Because obviously, your happiness then becomes very entwined with them. So,
Right.
you see, when you start looking at your needs and your wants, you're going to go, okay, so what's the difference between a need and a want? So a need is something that's essential. A need is something you're not going to compromise on. A need is something that you're going to set a hard boundary about. So for me, for instance, I will not be in a relationship with anyone who smokes. I will not be in a relationship with anyone who is disrespectful, who shouts. So you have these things and you have to identify them
Hmm.
first. Whereas your want is maybe more about how they look, what they do, the type of car they drive. And I think oftentimes we focus too much on the want. So we want someone who's tall, dark, and handsome, right? Let's
Hmm.
go for the stereotype. But we don't focus on the needs that is ours that that person is going to fulfill. And it's kind of like thinking about it when you go for a job interview, there's a set criteria that you as the person applying has to fulfill, right? And you don't go into that interview negotiating or thinking that that set criteria is unacceptable. You just know that that's
Right.
the set criteria, that is essentially the needs of the job.
Hmm.
And you go in, and the person recruiting is going to look at you and see whether you fulfill that criteria. And essentially, it's exactly the same with a relationship, in as much as you have to identify what your needs are. So, what are your needs? What's going to make you happy? What qualities in that other person is going to make you happy, is going to fulfill your needs? Because you see, what happens is when we focus too much on wants and not on our needs, we end up feeling dissatisfied. We
Right.
end up feeling resentful because we're focusing on not really what is going to fulfill us in
Right.
an emotional way. So it's really important to do the work beforehand and identify what those needs are. So when you think about, oftentimes you can think, well, how can I identify what my needs are? So one way to do it is to flip it and think about what you don't want in a relationship,
Mhm.
and then make those your needs. So, for instance, in a abusive relationship, obviously we've spoken about the red flags. So an abusive relationship, you're going to have someone who's pressuring you, who's jealous, who's controlling, who's shouting at you, talking to you in a disrespectful manner, putting you down, making you feel worthless, minimizing their issues, blaming you for stuff they've done. They might be intimidating you in some way. So, all of those types of things are bad behaviors.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, they also have opposites, which is good behaviors, which is respect, honesty, sharing, good communication. You're able to talk about
Right.
financial stuff without feeling nervous. It's
Mhm.
like you have shared responsibility, and you're able to talk about your feelings without feeling you have to pick your time.
Mhm.
You know, it's looking, and then you look at that and you go, okay, so that means I need someone who's kind, respectful, not jealous, good communicator. Maybe you might want to think someone who loves animals, maybe someone who's God-fearing, maybe someone who doesn't smoke, and someone who maybe is, I don't know, they might not necessarily have a good job now, but if they're, they might have the potential because maybe they're ambitious. So maybe you want someone, you might think, I need someone who's ambitious,
Mhm.
but you're not focusing on, I need someone who's earning 50K now. I
Right.
need someone who's doing this now,
Mhm.
because what you're doing is you're focusing on the stuff that's not really important,
Right.
and you're focusing on the stuff that could possibly change.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just looking at that and thinking about, what are my needs, what's a healthy relationship look like, and then doing the work beforehand. And obviously, as a parent, we can have all these types of conversations with our children and our daughters, and it doesn't have to come across that it's in a naggy kind of way. You can just have it as a general conversation. Like, maybe you can say, oh, I've read this book, I saw this TV program, I saw this, what do you think about that? I mean,
Right.
recently on Netflix, there's been I don't know if you've heard about it, it's been a TV series called Dirty John. So I would he's a coercive, manipulative, toxic person, and
Mhm.
it's all about how he managed to get her into a relationship with him, and he used like all the manipulative tactics, the red flags I've spoken about, and it's a good program to just watch with your, as a woman anyway, but also if you've
Mhm.
got teenage daughters, to watch with them, because one, it's educational, and two, it opens up conversation. And I think within a family, you cannot have enough conversation, especially with your kids.
Right. Well, and I think too, something I do with my son, he's 9, so our kids are close to the same age. But, we'll just be driving and I'll ask him like, "So what do you want in a wife someday? What do you want, what do you want in your partner? Like what is it?" And he's 9, so he wants her to be pretty and nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's pretty simple. But I want him to start thinking now about what the expectation is, a clear expectation in
Definitely.
his relationships moving forward. So, I mean, right now pretty and nice. Does he think she's pretty? And
Mm-hmm.
is she nice? And I mean, those are very basic, but at least he knows that he doesn't want to be with somebody who's mean and makes him feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, it doesn't really matter where you're at, how old your child is. It's important that you start giving them ideas, and it's possible that it could be too late to talk about. I mean, it may not necessarily too late, but if they're already in a bad relationship, that approach would have to be a lot more sensitive, gentle, because they probably already know that the relationship isn't great, but maybe don't want you to know as the parent. or as the friend, they may be trying to hide and cover things up. So, I think it's important that we're having these conversations with our friends, with our communities, with our nieces, nephews, whoever, like to let them know that, like, it's your choice who you get to
Hmm.
who you want to spend, be a partner with, the rest of your life. It's not necessarily who you just fall in love with, like, because I
Absolutely.
think it's probably anybody who dated very much has been in love with more than one person. And so, being in love is one thing, but finding somebody who really is honoring you, respecting you, and doing all these things that you talked about in the list of wants and needs, and you're in love with, that's what you want. The love is not maybe it comes along with it, but it's not just love in a relationship.
Totally.
And I think as a teenager, like, you have all those feelings, and I can think back to some of the people that I dated, and now I'm like, that was strange, like, that I was with that person. But it was just that those teenage feelings, those young
Mhm.
adult feelings of just this love and abundance, and just like, I mean, I just remember feeling like I had so much love to give to everybody, and now I'm a little more reserved with it because of my family, my kids and stuff. I'm like, but anyways, at that time in your life, you have so many feelings. I think it's important that we think with our heads, um, as well as with our hearts and our gut. And that's what you've talked about today. So as far as boundaries, I think that you've given us a good idea. But was there anything else on boundaries that you wanted to talk about?
Just really with regards boundaries, it's not feeling. The thing is with boundaries is like quite often we'll feel guilty when we say no, or we'll feel guilty
Hmm.
when we make someone wait. And then that guilt normally makes us change our mind and go back on our boundary,
Hmm.
which then effectively makes that boundary worthless.
Right.
So with boundaries really is like a three-step process. If you think about it, it's like you've got the boundary, so you state the boundary, you then implement the boundary, and then you put a consequence around that boundary. And you have to do those three things to make a boundary effective.
Hmm.
And and within that, you have to work on maybe the feelings that you have around that, such as guilt, sadness, anger, that might stop you from basically making the consequence happen. Because you see, it's all very well saying to someone, I mean, let's use this as an example. You always meet someone, you tell them they need to meet you at 7 o'clock, and they're always late.
Hmm.
So you then say to them, you know what, next time we meet, can you please make sure you're on time? I don't like it when you're always late. So this is you setting your boundary, communicating your boundary, and implementing it, right? So the next time, and then you say to them, if you're late, I'm gonna leave. I won't be here. So
Right.
that's your consequence. But it's no point saying your consequence unless you can follow through on it. Because you
Hmm.
see,
Right.
if they turn up and it's 7:10 and you still haven't left, it makes your boundary totally pointless.
It's a
And
joke. Yeah.
it's a joke, exactly. But you see, you might say to yourself, oh, they might be stuck in traffic, they're coming from work, let me give them a little bit more time. And basically, what you're doing by having that attitude, you're discounting yourself
Hmm.
because you're actually making them more important than you. You're
Right.
making their needs and their wants, and you're allowing them to disrespect you. So you see, this is a real test as well as to whether or not someone's toxic, because you see, if you implement a boundary and put in a consequence, then essentially that person, say you it got to like 7:05 and they hadn't turned up, so you just decided to go home, and then the next time you see them and they go to you, why was you not waiting? And you say,
Hmm.
well, we spoke about this, I said this is what was going to happen, I find it really upsetting and disrespectful when you keep me waiting. A normal person will be like, you know what, I'm really sorry, I didn't realize you felt that strongly about it, next time I'll make sure I'm on time. Okay, so that's a healthy relationship, a healthy conversation. But it's a toxic person will then turn around and go, well, it's not my fault. I got stuck because this person did this,
Right.
and you really should have waited for me because it's made you really unkind and I was trying my best. So here you've got someone who's blame shifting, making you responsible for them being late,
Yeah.
and they're not taking any responsibility for their own actions. And it really, when you implement a boundary with a consequence, it really, really demonstrates the mindset of that person, and it keeps you safe. So boundaries are really, really important, and I can't stress enough how important it is to have them and to implement them and make sure there's consequences, because they will stop people from taking advantage of you. And this isn't
Yeah.
just in relationships, this is everyone. So this could be in your workplace, with your
Right.
friends, and you just have to remember that you are worthy of taking this time and having this respect shown to you.
Mhm.
And essentially, I think because often we suffer with you might have low confidence, low self-esteem. We kind of don't want to make a fuss. We say, oh, we don't want to make a scene.
Right.
We, we don't want to be seen as horrible. We don't want to be seen as the bitch, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And you put these feelings essentially of shame on you,
Right.
but those feelings, they're just nothing really. It's just your brain acting in a weird way. And you just need to tell yourself, no, I am worthy of being respected and I'm going to make sure I'm respected. And you do that with your boundaries.
Yeah. That is so good.
Mm.
All that is so good. And we've talked about so much of this in relation to romantic relationships, and um, probably the most abusive relationship I wouldn't say abusive, but toxic relationship I was in was with one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And I would remember her confronting me in front of a group of people about not having sex with somebody. Be like, why are you not doing it? Everybody else is doing it. And just feeling so humiliated when she knew what my boundaries were.
Mm-hmm.
And then her, calling me out in front of everybody as a teenager, in front of, I think there was like 10 people standing in this circle. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, oh my gosh, that was like the end. That was starting to be the end of our relationship because it
Yeah.
got to that point. But as those of you who are watching this, like, just keep in mind that when we talk about relationships, this is not just romantic relationships. This could be a relationship with your parent, which is a whole nother level. But it could be a parent, a sibling, a friend, an instructor. You could even get in a relationship like that with your instructors where things are not fair, or right, and there are boundaries being crossed. Be aware of this everywhere that you're looking. And Zoe, I love everything that you said. I think it is so good. It's not being taught in schools. It is being addressed in a case by case situation. And so I think that some resources are there for those that seek it, but it is not out there for those who are not seeking it out for themselves. And I think it's something that we all need to know. And I am in love with your mission and what you're teaching. I think it is so valuable. And I'm an educator. I teach for university here in the United States, and I love education. But there are some major things that we're missing, and this
Totally.
being a huge component, especially when we're talking about college age students and this time in their life where there's a huge component of relationship building, and potentially finding their life partners, and there are things that we need to be talking about. And I am so thankful that you came on here and shared with us. So um, you said you're going to give us a handout, and so I will
Oh,
link to
yes.
that. And
Yes, definitely.
will you tell everybody where they know people are going to want to know more? If nothing else, just look at your website and look at some of the stuff you have there. So where can we find you?
Sure. So you can find me on Facebook as Zoe Parsons, but my practice name is Self Love After Abuse. And you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I think I'm pretty Pinterest. I think I'm pretty much everywhere. So my website is www.selfloveafterabuse.com. And um, yeah, just comment if you've got any questions. If anyone's got any questions about anything we've spoken about, just send me a message. I'm more than happy to answer these things. I mean, on my Facebook and Instagram profiles, I'm always posting tips and information and just trying to kind of educate people
Hmm.
in bite-sized memes, as it were,
Yeah.
because it's easy to digest. And the thing is, I find, I mean, you mentioned about if you know someone who's in a toxic relationship, it's like really, if you are in that situation, the only thing you can do is to be patient, try and direct them and get them to
Hmm.
follow someone like me so that they're at least getting the information,
Right.
and just be there. Let them know that you're going to be there for them no matter what, no matter how frustrating it might seem to you. Just give them the time and the space to come to terms with the situation themselves, and then they will come to you for help.
Absolutely. That is so good. So I appreciate you. Thank you
Thank you for having me.
for taking the time to speak to um, me and the others who are going to be listening to this. And hopefully, we will be hearing more from you soon because I know like this was just the top of the iceberg. So there's so much more to learn. But I want to thank you
Certainly.
so much for coming on talking to us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, JoBeth here. I hope you enjoyed this interview, and no matter where you're at in your journey, I hope that you found the tips and tricks and information to be super helpful. If you haven't yet, I want you to go to jobethevans.com and take the college readiness quiz. There's a quiz there for parents and a quiz there for students. When you take that quiz, you get a detailed explanation of where you're at and actionable steps for you to take to move you beyond where you're at right now. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you soon.